Gemar Chatzima Tova. Great to see everyone again, and always this year, especially I want to acknowledge those who are watching us remotely. Some from hospitals, others recovering at home, and of course many are simply at home. Now last week I made a big deal about, putting on shoes to make this feel like a real service for you at home. Now you can take them off because we're really not supposed to, be wearing leather. That's one of the luxuries of Yom Kippur. So bare feet is okay. It's holy ground. But the part about staying out of the refrigerator, yeah, I'm going to say that again too. So everyone just settle in. And I'm going to tell you the Yom Kippuriest story I have heard in a long time. It is a true Yom Kippuriest story ever. Now, it's been a challenging year for all of us, but few can match the challenge that happened to lobsterman Michael Packard this choppy waters of Provincetown off Cape Cod. There's a little Cape Cod thread through these sermons, you might notice. He was having a pretty good day, caught a couple of 100 pounds of lobster when he went down for a third dive. And he ended up on the inside of a whale. And this is what he said in interviews. I'm sort of compiling them, synthesizing them. He said, I was descending. I almost got to the bottom. He was newspapers with Jimmy Kimmel's. All of a sudden, I felt this huge shove. And the next thing I knew, it was completely black. I was at about 35 feet. It's like I got hit by a freight truck. Just this bang, and everything went instantly dark, and I'm just moving fast through the water. And I'm like, what the heck? Did I just get eaten by a shark? I could sense I was moving, and I could feel the whale squeezing with the muscles in his mouth. And I was like, no, shark mouths aren't that big, and I don't feel any teeth. Oh, great, I didn't get eaten by a shark. I was completely inside. It was completely black, Packard said. I thought to myself, there's no way I'm getting out of here. I'm done. I'm dead. All I could think of was my boys. They're 12 and 15 years old. So Jimmy Kimmel asked him, so you're aware while you're in there that you're inside a whale? Absolutely. Did you begin to struggle and let the whale know that you were in there? I was struggling and banging and kicking and just thinking there's no way I'm going to get out of this unless he decides to let me go. So obviously he got out. Now how did he get out? Well, fortunately, he had scuba gear on, which allowed him to breathe also, but also the gear had some pointy, sharp edges that enabled him to make life uncomfortable for his host. So as he thrashed against the soft tissue, the whale must have felt like he was in the dentist's chair without Novocaine. Nothing against dentists. You all know I love you. And as Packard continued to struggle, the whale began shaking its head, and Packard could tell he didn't like it. At some point, about 30, 40 seconds into the ordeal, the whale decided it was better to have fish for dinner. Because humpbacks are not particularly aggressive toward humans. It was, just a big misunderstanding. Packard can be grateful that 30 million years ago, whales divided into the ones with teeth, like orcas and dolphins, and the so-called baleen whales, like humpbacks and blue whales, who filter their food without teeth. Thankfully, for him, the experience was less like being eaten than being shoved through a car wash. I'm sure he had a whale of a time. Pun alert. There are going to be puns. You have to understand. We've been waiting 18 months. It's Kol Nidrei, I know, but I can't see your smiles, so at least I got to hear your groans. So you got to say that this was, this big fella was Packard's whale of fortune, let's say. Okay. I hear those groans. Life at Temple Bethel. One expert speculated that the whale was probably a juvenile. A teen, confused, didn't realize he'd bitten off more than he could chew. Bygones be bygones. With a rush of water, Packard had a new lease on life. He was expectorated, along with probably a few hundred small fish, and God knows, probably a few plastic water bottles. Meanwhile, no one knows what became of the whale, but rumors have it that he headed right over to the orchodontist. You got to humor me here. If I get all the whale puns out now, I'll run out of them, and that'll be it. What we've really needed over this past year and a half are some really bad puns on Yom Kippur. Okay. So he was released from Cape Cod Hospital, and seriously, had a lot of soft tissue damage. Amazingly, no broken bones. Evidently, the whale was a very gracious host. And that is sort of the end of the tale as far as we know right now, but it is so perfect. When I first heard this, it was back in June, I was thinking Yom Kippur. I mean, right down to how it ended, with the wretch heard round the world. It was the same thing that happens in Jonah. Vayomer Adonai ladag, vayakev et Yonah el hayabasha. The Lord commanded the fish, who summarily vomited Jonah out upon dry land. And it was like this was singing to me. I bet every rabbi in the country is talking about this tonight. I don't know. I haven't really contacted it. But, it was singing. It was Jonah, 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 Jonah. Anyway. The key scene in the Jonah story that Jews throughout the world will read tomorrow afternoon takes place inside a whale, of course. And it's one of the most famous stories ever told for Jews, Muslims, and Christians. It was widely seen up until now as the world's first fish story, in the sense that a fish story is always seen as being not true, implausible, couldn't possibly have happened. Except it did. It happened just a few weeks ago. Jonah is now plausible. And what's even more amazing for Michael Packard, this wasn't the first time his life had been in the balance. 10 years ago, traveling in Costa Rica, he was a passenger in a small plane that crashed in the jungle, killing the pilot, co-pilot, and a passenger. He sustained multiple injuries to his abdomen, upper body, serious injuries, but amazingly, he lived. I'm just saying, but if Michael Packard asked you to ride an elevator with him, take the stairs. So now everything I've thought about the story of Jonah to this point has been turned upside down. Maybe it's a true story. If this happened, if this part of it could happen, maybe the rest of it is plausible. Man sent on a challenging mission to cry out against the sinful Mesopotamian city of Nineveh, to tell them they need to change their ways. An excruciating dilemma. Why should he put his life on the line to help people who live so far away from him, who aren't at all like him, whose views are totally different from his, with whom he has no connection at all, and whose sinful actions could not possibly have any impact on his life? I mean, Nineveh is so far from where Jonah was, in Jaffa, 727 miles. That's the distance from here to it's off. Florida. And nothing that happens in Florida has an impact on our lives up here, of course. There's no connection. So Jonah does what so many are doing now. He runs from responsibility. He heads to Jaffa and flees Jaffa because the real estate is too high. He ends up on a boat, not a lobster boat this time, just a boat going to Tarshish. In other words, the other way from where he's supposed to be going. He goes down to the port, down to the sea in ships, down, down, down. The word's repeated in the story many times as a motif. He's on the storm-tossed ship. Jonah shuts his eyes to the truth, even though his very name, Yonah ben Amittai, means Jonah, the son of truth. He goes down some more into the hold of the vessel, falls asleep there, while the sailors are terrified by the storm, each praying to his own God, except for Jonah, who's trying to escape his. And then Jonah is tossed from the ship and goes down into the water, into the darkness, but instead of drowning, he's saved by a great fish who swallows him, and he remains there for 3 days. What happens to Jonah inside the fish? So here's a moment for some comparative religions. As you know, I love that. It was my major in college. I've devoted my life to interfaith studies. So here's a Muslim commentator. And by the way, our Interfaith Council is going to be talking about Jonah in our midwinter class this coming year. So a Muslim commentator says, he's engulfed by darkness, the darkness of the deep, the darkness of the creature's stomach, the darkness of despair. Michael Packard talked about feeling that he was engulfed in darkness. A Christian commentator agrees that it was dark, but elaborates that darkness isn't always so bad. One says, you see in the dark something funny happens. Your other senses heighten. Smell and sound become more vivid. Your sense of touch is remembered as you feel the difference between a door and a wall, and a hand guides you down the hallway. In the dark, your eyes begin to adjust. The smallest light turns void into a picture. In the dark, we move slower. We have to. We are more aware of our breathing, our thoughts, even who we are. In the dark, we are given the gift of self-awareness and identity. And a Jewish commentator amplifies on the benefits of darkness. A dark place can be intimidating, scary, and seem overwhelming, and God is there. It's also a place of realization, renewal, and rebirth. This is the gift of the whale for Jonah and for our own lives. It is the gift of darkness. And in our urban society, we've lost our appreciation for the dark. As nature writer Henry Beston has written, with lights and ever more light, we drive the holiness of the night ever back to the forests and the sea. Today's civilization is full of people who do not have the slightest notion of the character and poetry of the night, who have never seen night. So we have different perspectives here. In the whale, in the dark, in the midst of a battle between life and death, Jonah realizes his deep connection to God and to all living things, a link that can only be felt, it cannot be seen. And then the whale exhales Jonah, so Jonah can inhale air. In Christian thought, Jonah's 3-day ordeal is a precursor to days from death to rebirth. Darkness before the dawn. It's precisely from the darkness of despair that one can find the seeds of redemption. And the rabbis in Midrash have a similar concept regarding the destruction of Jerusalem. There's a story in the Talmud, pretty well known, where Rabbi Akiva sees foxes scampering among the ruins of the temple, and he laughs. His colleagues are appalled. They see foxes in the ruins of the temple. But he says, quoting Lamentations, Mount Zion lies desolate, and the foxes walk upon it, so said Jeremiah. But if that prophecy came true, he says, that means that the prophecies of Jerusalem's restoration will also come to pass. And they did, 2,000 years later. So it's interesting that just a couple of years ago, in August of 2019, you go on YouTube and you see this video of foxes scampering on the ancient stones near the Western Wall. Hadn't been seen before. Foxes at the Kotel, a man swallowed by a whale and surviving. All in our day, maybe we're being given signals that our dark times are about to lead to brighter days after all. So one thread of commentary on Jonah in the whale focuses on this journey in and out of the whale as being a journey from darkness to light. But there's another approach. This is a Jewish take from the Midrash. That's even more captivating. According to Rabbi Eliezer, the inside of the fish's mouth wasn't dark at all. The fish's eyes were like windows. And fish's eyes have become charms, have become very important folk items. Fish's eyes were like windows, and a pearl inside its mouth provided further illumination. And then Jonah goes in the whale's mouth, and what does he see? A synagogue. It was decorated like a synagogue. Now, I've heard people call this room sort of like Noah's Ark upside down. I'm not really sure how they see that, but maybe it looked a little like this. And you know what? The biblical text, the text of Jonah, seems to be leaning in that direction too, because right after Jonah is in the whale, what happens next? He prays. And this is what he prays. This is very interesting. And it's similar to other Psalms and other passages, but it says, "Out of my distress I called upon the Lord, and God answered me. From the belly of Sheol I cried out, and you heard my voice. You cast me into the deep. The waters closed in over me. The deep engulfed me. Weeds entwined me. Yet you brought my life up from the pit." It's a really moving prayer. There's only one problem. Here's the key. He's still in the whale while he's reciting it. He's not depressed. He's not distressed. He mentions everything in the past tense. He called upon the Lord. God answered him. It hadn't happened yet, but that's what he said. He called upon the Lord. He's seeing life with great clarity. And he's grateful and he's thankful for a redemption that hasn't happened to him yet. So the midrashic version of the story here is very optimistic. It's not about darkness, even though the darkness does turn to light. It's about confidence. It's about faith. It's about seeing the truth and overcoming despair. And his quarters are comfy, like the soft gums of a whale's mouth. Imagine a prayer room. Sometimes we have pillows on the floor when we do our Shabbat in the round. That's probably what they're imagining, what the rabbis are imagining, sort of a Middle Eastern prayer service. And it's very similar to Michael Packard's reaction in some ways, in that he sees his situation with great clarity. If I were inside a whale, I'm not sure I could even remember what I thought. But Jonah not only remembers, he says a prayer. So the issue isn't so much despair or hopefulness with this midrash, it's mindfulness. He's completely aware. He's mindful. He may be sitting in the darkness, but what he sees is light, even inside the whale. Clarity, gratitude, the simple joy of being part of this great tapestry of existence. That's what comes across from Jonah. Now, it should be mentioned that in the book of Jonah, which we read tomorrow afternoon, he does experience despair later, much later. It's sort of a PTSD, when he witnesses the death of a plant and suddenly discovers that he feels compassion for the plant. And there's a deep connection among all creatures, great and small. But he learned that in the whale. He was more alive in the whale than he was on dry land, and certainly on the boat where he fell asleep. The whale gave him a chance to prove his mettle. This is part of folklore. Think of the story of Pinocchio, who voluntarily goes into the belly of the whale to free Geppetto, which he does, not with scuba gear, but by building a fire to make the whale sneeze. And that's how he proves his manhood, actually his boyhood, his humanhood. I'm a real boy. That was such a cheap laugh. I'll put in the link to Shrek. You'll see it there. For Jonah, the time in the whale is life-changing. And then he's expelled through the birth canal, the blowhole, cuts the cord and realizes at that moment he's not God's puppet. He is a creature with a conscience. He must make his own moral choices and take responsibility for them. For the first time, he realizes he's got no strings to hold him down. And this helps Jonah to understand that the people of Nineveh have the power to make their choices too. They can change their ways. As a free being, he can make the choice to care for them and help them by warning them as God had instructed. There's more to this midrash. It's fascinating. Jonah befriends the whale. By the way, if you don't think that this kind of interspecies friendship is possible, I mean, of course it's possible with many of our pets and domesticated animals. I'm talking about under the sea. See the movie My Octopus Teacher. It's an amazing film, won Best Documentary at the Oscars. I give it 8 thumbs up. These mollusks are brilliant, capable of great courage, tenderness, like whales. So the friendship is distinctly possible. And the midrash, actually in the movie too, it sort of happens. The whale indicates to Jonah that he expects to die soon. So Jonah confronts him and helps him out and teaches him to care, and the fish then teaches Jonah to care about those who have no connection to him, to the people in Nineveh, to the people 700 plus miles away, wherever you happen to be. We need to care. He learns that in the end, we're all on the same boat or alongside it. Then the Midrash goes on to say that Jonah makes a deal with the whale. He promises to save the whale from Leviathan, which is this mythical sea creature who's much bigger, is threatened to eat him. Yes, Jonah found it, saved the whales. So there's light there in the Jonah story. There's safety, there's love. These midrashim, these stories, pose 2 opposite possibilities. Was it scary inside the whale, or was it a place of nurturing? And the answer can be both. You know, when we think about the wilderness experience for the Israelites, 40 years of wandering, the Torah and the Bible present both options, a time of great turmoil and a time when the Israelites were nurtured and given all that they needed to survive under God's protective wing. So let's use these possibilities, and that leads me to this. Yom Kippur challenges us to ask ourselves this question. What would you do during your precious moments inside that whale? Mary Oliver wrote in her famous poem, The Summer Day, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? COVID has been for us what the 3 days of darkness were for Jonah in the whale. In some ways, it's been dark and dangerous. And in other ways, we felt protected inside our cocoons. But either way, what we do with these precious days and months can help us in developing an approach to the rest of our life journey. Just to give an example, what have we done here? Here, in our community, we've seen a lot of frustration, a lot of fatigue, but at times tremendous comfort and connection. You know, for example, our virtual services. They're all undoubtedly, and they are already being scaled back a little bit. That'll happen as we return to normalcy, God willing. But on another level, they are here to stay. For so many of us, they've been lifesavers. There has not been a single day over the last 18 months, I repeat, not a single day when we have not had a minion at our online services. Even during blizzards and hurricanes, times we never would have even ventured to have services back in the day. Heat waves, cold snaps. No one's had to leave the house. Yet we've all been together saying Kaddish, remembering and reminiscing about loved ones, laughing and crying together. Over the summer, we compiled first-person short essays of our experiences during this past year and a half, and I really, really implore you to read them. We've given the link, we'll do it again. These essays are the very stuff of community. And it's getting even more fascinating now that we're hybrid. Here we have, last week Rosh Hashanah too. We had a nice turnout here and a really nice one online too. We put them together, we had one unified community. That is what we are right now. You and you and you, wherever the camera is. By the way, Jonah had Wi-Fi in the whale. I even know the cell carrier, do you know? T-Mobi. I dedicate that to you, Alan. So what should we do with our time in the whale? We need to see the experience as Jonah and Michael Packard saw it, as a time to grow. Whether it was 3 days, as it was for Jonah, or 30 seconds, as it was for Packard. We need to grow from it, and we need to remember what we learned. The columnist Virginia Heffernan wrote in the LA Times, "That's what happens with trauma. We forget. The mind can be kind to us in this way, but it's also important to remember not just the trauma, but also the lived experience during the worst of the outbreak. The pandemic made room for long periods of contemplation and stock-taking, to say nothing of brooding, fighting, and fretting. It's possible to hold on to the knowledge, to keep building on it, without remaining stuck in anxiety." What else would I do in the whale? Seek connection. Seek connection. Get beyond, worrying about what's not here, what we could have in the future. Millions of British soccer fans at the Euro Cup finals learned this great lesson that they have taught the world for many decades. It's the hope that kills you. National team made it so far. Finals at Wembley, and then the Italians dashed their dreams. Well, Jonah understood this too. As I mentioned, he prayed in the belly of that whale, not for some future hoped-for event, but for redemption that had already happened in his mind. He was thankful for the gift of life, for the companionship of the amazing animal that had rebirthed and befriended him. It was not hope that saved him, it was companionship and the knowledge that he was never alone. And it reminds me of a great quote from the new hit series, Ted Lasso, which also talked about the hope that kills you. "There's something worse than being sad, and that's being alone and being sad." A key message of the book of Jonah is that no one, anywhere, even in Nineveh, is ever alone. No one here is ever alone. And Jonah and Michael Packard taught us that home can be anywhere. No one is ever away from home as long as you have life around you, as long as you have connection. If you're inside 30 tons of blubber, you're at home. We've known that for centuries. Next week in the sukkah, we've experienced a portable home. Did you know that a whale can be used for a wall of a sukkah? It's true. Not a living whale, but a whale. What else would I do in the belly of the whale? I'd watch my home breathe. Can you imagine what it must be like to be inside a whale and feel it breathing with its lungs inflating and deflating from the inside? Imagine Jonah and Michael Packard watching the entirety of the space around them expanding and contracting with each breath. We talk a lot about being mindful of our own breathing, and it's good. It's a good thing. But if you can't be swallowed by a whale over the next couple of days, and it's very possible you will not be, then do something like this. Go to Stamford Nature Center and watch the goats breathe. Watch animals breathe. Watch your pet breathe. I watched mine stop breathing. It's one of the most powerful moments of my life. Watch them breathing, and you will come away changed. And then throughout the Yom Kippur services, try something different. Instead of saying the substitute for God's name that we have been saying for so many centuries, Adonai, Lord, let's pronounce the 4 letters, Yud He Vav He, as they're written on the page, which is breath. Kendra Kaplan actually, in one of the things that she sings, which we often see in renewal liturgy, we should try that. Let's think of God in terms of breath and life. Because Adonai is all about hierarchy. But if we try to pronounce Yud He Vav He with no vowels, it's simply a breath. It's a universal connector between all forms of life, animals and plants. It expresses an interwoven ecological rather than hierarchical understanding of the world, the uniqueness of each being within the unity of all being, fitting together like the diverse pieces of a jigsaw puzzle in the whole array, says the well-known Jewish thinker Art Waskow. We're part of that puzzle. This living being called being, this organism called earth. Watch the whale breathe. The whale's breathing became Jonah's salvation, his birth canal from darkness to life, from death to life. Sense the utter interdependence between host and guest, between us, our whale, and our planet. This summer, we watched the earth breathe. Actually, we saw it choke. Our blue skies turned brown because of fires thousands of miles away. Did you experience it? Did your eyes burn? Mine burned on the Massachusetts Turnpike. It's not that close to the Caldor fire. That was darn scary. But did we just go about our day as if it's nothing? To lose the blue sky? We watched our planet belch out an unfathomable amount of water and wind, breaking 2 all-time records for rainfall in Central Park in a week. So during our time in the belly of the whale, let's watch our home breathe. Let's also contemplate this. The largest animal on the planet cared about the fate of a simple human. Jonah and Michael Packard were saved by the most majestic of beasts, who was a true Prince of Wales. How could we not care about these majestic creatures? The whale exhaled and people lived. We are all, in a sense, survivors of Jonah's ordeal, and we should take that gift of renewed life and do something special. We are survivors. What is that special thing that we can do to help the world over the coming year? That should come out of our time inside the whale over the next day. Maybe we can come up with more whale puns for the betterment of humankind, or to return the hockey team to Hartford. So what would you do with these precious moments inside the whale? Let that be your question over the next day and beyond, as over the coming weeks, God willing, we begin to crawl out of the caves where we've been hiding. What will we do with our one wild and precious life? The journey we are on, it's dizzying, it's maddening, infuriating at times. But if there's one thing that the story of Jonah and Michael Packard teaches us, the Yom Kippuriest story of all time, it's that we should enjoy the ride. For if we do, every moment of life will be worthwhile. Amen.